Among Us, the cross-platform multiplayer game where you and your friends complete your task, all the while one or more of you start mercilessly killing each other in secret. It's chaotic, it's challenging, it's fun, and I swear to God if I have to do that spinning circle task again, I'm going to lose my gourd. The bad guys in the game are called imposters, fellow astronauts chosen at random that look like everybody else but are secret monsters out to murder everyone. It's entertaining because it's ridiculous and it couldn't exist in the real world. But then I remember, maybe I'm forgetting something. Or someone. For the rest of this video, I want to take all the psychology of group dynamics and just put it over here off to the side for now. Yeah, isn't that lovely? Instead, I'd like to talk about two contenders in my mind for psychological equivalents of imposters. These are real psychological phenomena or disorders, so even though I will be providing some sources, I will be calling them by their common names so you can look them up afterwards. The Capgras Delusion, otherwise known as imposter syndrome, is a psychological phenomenon in which people who experience it believe that people who are closest to them have been replaced by lookalikes, even imposters. Okay. The delusion most often occurs accompanying a diagnosis of paranoid schizophrenia, but it's thought to have an anatomical basis because it frequently comes with damage to the brain as well. The damage is thought to occur in the area of the brain responsible for autonomic face recognition. What does that mean? Well, normally when we see the face of someone that we have an emotional bond with, there's a corresponding emotional response that occurs that we don't even really notice. In people with this disorder, that automatic background process is disrupted. So when they see a person that they share an attachment with, their brains can't find that link between recognizing their face and the emotional connection that they have, so their brain rationalizes it by telling them that they just look like their loved ones and that they aren't the real thing. Can you imagine? What a way to find out that you're not as important to somebody as you think you are. No, all of you are imposters. None of you are the real thing. Oh, hey, Ort. Hey. The interesting thing is often that the delusion can be circumvented. In the case of brain damage, the damage is often within the visual network, while the auditory network is often still intact. What this often means is that their family members can go out of their line of sight and call them on the phone, and they can actually recognize them as their loved ones again. But that's more like what happens when everyone thinks you're an imposter. What if we get a little weirder? What if there is an imposter living inside you right now? An 81-year-old woman with an otherwise unremarkable medical history was admitted to the hospital with a tingling sensation across the left side of her body. 2 days later, she complained that her left hand was acting as if it was under someone else's control. It repeatedly hit her in the face and head, and even reportedly choked her. So what happened? MRIs revealed that she had an infarction affecting several parts of her brain, causing, among other things, alien hand syndrome. Alien hand syndrome is a motor control disorder involving involuntary movements, typically in one hand and on the left side of the body. What usually happens is that there is some sort of damage, intentional or otherwise, to the frontal lobes or corpus callosum. This damage usually affects the connections and communication between the left and right hemispheres of the brain. The funny thing is, you never quite realize it, but there's always more to you than the you that speaks inside your head. There are two hemispheres of your brain that typically work together, but only one of them has language. Your left hemisphere is the one that you're using when you're having your inner monologue or thoughts, even though that there's more going on in the background that is not attached to a statement of, I am doing this thing. Normally, the right hemisphere coordinates and directs the action of the left side of the body, and the left hemisphere coordinates and directs the actions of the right side of the body, and they work together through the connections of the corpus callosum and other areas to speak with each other and even sometimes inhibit what each other is doing. When they work in sync, the system gives the appearance of one big working system instead of two. The extremely interesting part about alien hand syndrome is that within these patients, their hemispheres suddenly find themselves to be completely alone. The left hemisphere thinks that everything is normal, while the right hemisphere finds itself cut off from its only way to speak. So when people who have alien hand syndrome experience their left hand moving on its own, it's not some unseen force moving it, it's actually themselves, just a part of them that has no way to communicate with them for what reason or why it's moving. It's no wonder that people who experience it often give their limbs new identities or describe them as being controlled by aliens or demons. It's not often that these alien hands are violent, but their actions are always curious to me, and often they're found in experimental settings to be more than just random. I remember the case of one study where they took patients who had alien hand syndrome and sat them at a table in which they had a plate of their preferred cookies in the center, and they were told not to have any. Although they could resist going for it themselves, researchers were interested to note that their alien hand would continue to try and acquire one for them, even when they used their free hand to stop it. In subsequent studies, they also found that if they presented the participants with a pair of objects, then put those objects in a bag of more objects, if they asked the participants to look for just one of the pair, the alien hand would go and find the other without the participant even thinking about it. So what are we to make of all this? Well, it's an interesting thought to me to be reminded that any one moment, with very little changes, there is another me trapped inside my skull that I will never be able to communicate with, nor reason with should it ever see the light of day. And there's one inside you, too.